Warning, this content is for entertainment and educational purposes only. What's up, Gym Bros? Big Paul here with another Anabolic Q&A. This is where I answer your questions about training, nutrition, and responsible performance enhancement, all while keeping you safer from the stupid shit I know you bros love to do and getting you better results at the same time. Today's questions come from my school Anabolic Bodybuilding members community. You can join up over there for $30 a month. If you want to do so, your questions are guaranteed to be asked on the Q&As. It's pretty cheap. Have a lot of great people over there, and we answer questions directly to the community. If you have questions, you can post them over there. Some of the questions I have lined up today include: what are your thoughts of using insulin on a bulk, and do the gains stick permanently? We hear a lot about Tren rage, but what about low-dose Tren? Would that alleviate some of the side effects while still getting us similar results? How do you track your workouts and implement progressive overload in a structured way? If you're already taking growth hormone, could taking Tesamorelin have added benefit, or are you just duplicating things with no additional benefits? I have all these questions lined up and many more. We're going to dig into all of them in just 1 second. All right, first question I got lined up today is from Brian L. from the School Anabolic Bodybuilding members community. Brian asks, how do you track and log your workouts? Can you give an example of how you plan progression and apply progressive overload? I don't know that you can specifically plan progression. I think that's where you get in trouble as a bodybuilder. It's not like, say, a power lifter where they are programming out a 1 rep max goal and they know that they need to do certain lifts. They need to hit a 3 rep and all that good stuff. Power lifters are fantastic at programming things out. So we can't go about it in that sort of way with bodybuilding. Now, I think the basics is just to track what you're doing. Use some sort of progression app. Handwrite it in a logbook the old-fashioned way like we used to do back in the day. A lot of guys I see at the gym still handwrite things down. I use a Google Sheet. That's what I do at this point. I track things in Google Sheets. Really the goal with progressive overload, it's pretty simple. It's sort of a foolproof way earlier on in your journey when you're a beginner and intermediate lifter is... First and foremost, this is the most important thing for hypertrophy. You need to control your form. You need to pick exercises that are going to maximize your ability to stimulate the muscle in a way that's going to elicit a response for hypertrophy, mechanical tension. We have to keep in mind that when we're constructing our programs and perfecting form, that it's not about moving the most weight. I think this is where you can get yourself in trouble with the logbook, is when guys get too obsessed with advancing the logbook and beating PRs. A lot of times they will modify form as such to increase the amount of weight that they move from point A to point B, but not actually increase mechanical tension. So you'll see a lot of guys that are really strong, especially in power sports, which is the goal, really. You want to move weights from point A to point B. They perfect their form in such a way that they increase weight, but they don't actually grow any additional muscle. In bodybuilding, we actually want to make the lift less efficient, right? We want to place the most amount of mechanical tension on the muscle. And this is where the progressive overload comes into place. We need to make sure that we have perfected our form and our exercise selection in such a way that we are maximizing mechanical tension, not making the weight easier to lift, but making the weight put the most tension on the muscle, which ultimately is going to lead to hypertrophy. And then we start progressing those lifts within that constraint of good form. So when we're tracking stuff, whatever platform you plan to use tracking things, say you're doing 8 reps with your chest press this week at 100 pounds, you're going to want to try to get 9 reps next week with that 100 pounds. You have a prescribed rep range. So, for example, let's say our rep range is going to be 8 to 12 reps. Once we hit 12 reps and are able to hit 12 reps with that weight, the next week we bump the weight up to, say, 105 pounds, and we progressively do this, progressively overload the muscle. Now, that has a limited shelf life. You're not going to be able to progress exercises forever. Big compound movements, pressing movements, leg presses, squats, rows, things like that, you can continually progress those for a pretty long time up into your advanced bodybuilding stage, where ultimately you're going to hit a wall. And, so for example, let's say you're incline bench pressing 405 for 10 reps. I mean, how much more are you going to progress that? How much further can you really take that without increasing risk of muscle tears? So that's when you have to get a little more detailed with your training and do other things like change form, change exercise selection, add more volume. There's other things that advanced lifters are doing. You eventually have a expiration date and shelf life on the progressive overload. Other things expire sooner on. So for example, like, how far are you going to progress cable curls, right? So I don't know that progressive overload is as important on cable curls. So, I mean, like, what are you going to be doing, 100 pounds on cable curls? I see dudes in the gym doing that, the guys that are obsessed with a logbook, and they almost always have small arms. It's never the dudes with the big arms that are trying to move the most weight on things like that, or doing 100-pound dumbbells for lateral raises, something silly like that. It's not usually the big dudes that are doing that kind of stuff. So, summing this up, you need to perfect your form to maximize mechanical tension. You don't worry about moving the weight, making the weight more efficient from moving point A to point B. We want to place maximum mechanical tension on the muscle, perfect that form, then progress that weight until a reasonable place where we can't progress it anymore. So, if I'm doing lateral raises with a 45-pound dumbbells or 50-pound dumbbells, I don't see dudes slinging the 70s around having bigger shoulders. They usually have bigger egos, or more fragile egos, I guess I should say. Hell, you don't ever see me doing lateral raises with more than 35 or 40-pound dumbbells, and I have at most, and I have pretty big shoulders. Same thing with curls. I usually don't curl more than a 40-pound dumbbell, and I have 20-inch arms or 21-inch arms. I don't know what they are. I have pretty big arms, and yet I'll see the 165-pound broccoli head in the gym curling more than me because he's progressing. So keep in mind, progressive overload is a foolproof way of doing things if you keep everything buttoned up, if you understand the context of maximizing mechanical tension for eliciting hypertrophy. If you're intelligent about how you do it, it can be a great tool, and I would say it's more in the beginning to intermediate phase. As you become an advanced lifter, then you need to start deploying other more advanced techniques. But great early on. I did a lot of progressive overload training when I was younger. I think if you're a younger lifter, perfect way to advance yourself in the gym. Get strong first in the lifts that matter for bodybuilding, and then as we get later on in our journey, then we'll start buttoning up and tightening things up a little more, getting a little more fancy with how we train. And that's it. That's progressive overload in a nutshell, and that's how I would track it. Whatever app that you prefer, whatever platform that you prefer, maybe a notebook, that's fine too. But don't get obsessed with beating the logbook. Sometimes you can get yourself into trouble there. I see guys that don't actually get better at lifting weights, they get better at cheating. Next question here is from Christopher E. Christopher asks, what are your thoughts on using insulin during a bulk? Do the gains stick long term, or are they mostly temporary or cosmetic? I feel like I maybe answered this question or something similar last week, but I'll give it to you in a nutshell. So let's look at it. There's two things that are happening with insulin, and I explained this before. We're going to have the acute effect of using insulin, which is going to be increased glycogen synthesis, amino acid uptake, all of these things that are going to be temporary in nature. You're going to have more water retention, more glycogen retention. You're going to have bigger, fuller muscles, and it's a temporary effect. And that goes away when you stop using it and eating less carbs. That part is temporary, but long term, you're going to have increased capacity for muscle protein synthesis and muscle glycogen synthesis from using the insulin. Insulin's going to help with nutrient partitioning. And the gains that you see people lose when they come off of insulin, it's not necessarily contractile tissue. It's just less glycogen synthesis, less water retention. That's temporary. That goes away. That bubbly fullness that we see, the full look that you hear bodybuilders talk about, that's temporary. Actual contractile tissue that we accumulate, that is going to be more or less permanent, right? You have to go into a extreme caloric deficit. There's things that you have to do to get and you'll see it with guys retired, guys that have a lot of lean, dense muscle tissue. I think it was Ian Valieri. I think talking to him, he came completely off for like a year and a half, 2 years, something. I think that's what I heard him say. And he, was still fucking massive. He's just a big dude. He's accumulated a lot of tissue. I remember Dave Palumbo when he was downsizing. I think it took him like 10 years or something to get all of his size off to get back down to a leaner body weight that's better for longevity. And you'll see that with a lot of older bodybuilders that have accumulated a lot of real contractile tissue. It's not just water retention and fullness. The D-ball GH insulin pump look that some dudes have. So yes, I there's some of it that is temporary. There is some of it that is long-term. And you could make an argument that the temporary effect of having the insulin in play and having the additional water retention and glycogen synthesis is going to improve performance in the gym and indirectly allow you to have more hypertrophy because you can move more weights around. You have more leverage. You have better mechanical tension because you can move more weights around. So it's not a direct input for muscle hypertrophy, but indirectly it could lead to potential hypertrophy. Same thing with the increased amino acid uptake. Long term, that's only going to help increase IGF-1 conversion from using insulin. That is only going to help increase GLUT4 transport and glycogen synthesis. That's only going to help long term. But that's it in a nutshell. Yes, you can hang on to some of the gains that you get from insulin long term. Some of them are going to be temporary because it's just water and glycogen. All right, next question here is from Bamba Fits. Bamba asks, I'm using 4 units of fast-acting Humalog insulin pre-workout about twice per week, and strength has increased significantly. Are there any downsides to using insulin this sparingly in terms of blood sugar regulation? Potentially. I mean, more insulin that you use is increasing the risk of having insulin resistance long term. More insulin exposure is higher risk of insulin resistance. So that is something to consider, although that's a pretty low dose, pretty moderate dose that you're using right now. There is the acute risk of using insulin, of going hypoglycemic. But once again, that's also dose related to how much insulin you're using versus your carbohydrate intake. This is not my recommended guidelines, but I know for diabetics, it's usually 1 unit of insulin per 10 grams of carbohydrates is what is used for rapid insulin in a meal. For non-diabetics, it's probably double or triple that. Most people I talk to and say they start off at somewhere around 20 grams of carbohydrates per unit of insulin, rapid insulin. You have to just be careful and monitor your glucose levels. I would say for the guys that are messing around with it, most of them are either using a glucose monitor, a blood glucose monitor, and carrying that with them, or using a CGM to monitor things carefully and closely. But I would say the risk is pretty low at that dose, but the big risk that you're going to have to keep an eye on short term, acutely, would be going hypoglycemic. For anyone who's crazy enough to use insulin, you should keep some glucose tabs in your bag, have some sort of insulin monitor in your bag. If you're doing it pre-workout, if guys are doing it pre-workout, I would always make sure that I have an intra-workout carbohydrate shake, so I'm not going hypo mid-workout. Nothing would be worse than going hypo on a leg press and get sandwiched up in a leg press. I've seen that happen before. It's a story for another day. I know a bro that went hypo when he was doing leg presses from running insulin and almost killed himself on a leg press. I know another dude who went hypo post workout and crashed into a light pole driving home indirectly, going hypo, passing out in his car. Almost killed himself that way. So those are always risks that you have to keep in mind. But, hey, my take on insulin is for the casual gym goer, not worth fucking with. If you're an advanced bodybuilder and you're trying to be the next Mr. Olympia, it is probably cost of doing business. I'm not telling you should do that. I just know what guys do. Be careful, be smart, be considerate, take all the precautions that are necessary if you're going to dabble. Insulin's not to play around with. All right, next one here is from Jashenic Lifts. We hear a lot about Tren range, but what about low dose Tren? Say 100 to 200 milligrams a week for 8 weeks. Would that provide meaningful growth with fewer side effects? Or are side effects still likely at that dose? Well, I wouldn't consider 200 milligrams a week a light dose. I mean, I'd say that's more of a moderate dose of trenbolone. When I think about light dosing of trenbolone, I think it's something like 5 to 10 milligrams per day. So we're talking about 35 to 70 milligrams per day. I've heard of bros microdosing it at that level. I know Vigorous Steve has a bunch of stuff up about that, where you can microdose, minimize side effects, and still leverage a fair amount of the positive effects that you get from Tren at those doses. Now, is it going to be as effective? I don't know. There's an axiom in toxicology about the toxicity of a drug. It's really it's three factors. It's compound choice, its duration, its dose. The shorter the duration, the lower the dose of a toxic, considerably more toxic than other compound, which Tren is probably one of the more toxic injectables. It's a Tren and DHB, in my experience, of the things that I've seen, are probably the two riskiest injectables you can mess with. I'm sure I'm probably missing something, but those Tren, DHB, Mint, those are probably the three that I would put in the higher risk injectable territory. From what I have seen, guys that run it long term tend to get fucked up after a while, even at lower doses. I know for me, even a small dose, it affects me pretty profoundly. Mainly the psychological aspects of it with Tren. I think the biggest risk with Tren, more so than anything, is melting your noodle long term. That's what I've seen. I don't know that there's a huge risk. Otherwise, I have seen some pretty shitty kidney markers from guys that run Tren for amounts of time. But look, I get the argument for using Tren. It is very attractive. It does a lot of unique things that other steroids don't do. And when I'm evaluating using something that's going to be higher risk in my own personal protocols, if I'm going to take a risk, it's going to be a calculated risk. And it better damn well be something that does something uniquely well that you cannot accomplish with another safer compound. In Tren, you can make an argument that there are things that it does uniquely well that you can't do with other compounds. Now, for me, in my recent years, the lack of sleep, the anxiety that I got from using Tren just wasn't worth it to me, so I decided to pull it out of my protocols. I didn't use it. I personally, if it were me and I was younger and using Tren, I would limit it to just the contest prep window, 6 to 8 weeks on the contest prep. And I would keep the doses very low. To me, smaller doses, the ones where you're going to have minimal side effects and still get some benefit from it, probably are around the 10 milligrams per day dose, 70 milligrams a week. The old parabolins that the bodybuilders back in the 80s and 90s would use, late 80s, early 90s. I think they were 76 point whatever. Some bro with autism in the comment section is going to tell me I'm wrong. It was whatever. But I remember that after you factored in the molecular weight of the ester, the fatty ester that's attached to the molecule, that it worked out to be 50 milligrams of Tren. Most of those guys were running 1 to 2 of those a week. Some, in a more aggressive situation, were running 3 a week. So we're talking about, when factoring in for the weight of the ester, we're talking about really 100 to 150 milligrams of the compound. It was a typical dose. So 2 to 3 ampules of those a week. Parabolin is what guys used back in the day. But look, if you want to run Tren, I would keep the dose low. I would keep the duration short. For me, it's 8 weeks or less. For me, I would never run more than, at this point, I've tried higher doses. To me, for my own personal experience, where the curve slash side effect, the side effect slash benefit curve, the bell curve, where yeah, I'm getting benefits here, and then it starts to dip back down. The benefits are less, and the side effects just start to go up, is somewhere around 140 to 200 milligrams a week. 20 to 25 milligrams per day is kind of where I tap out, and then past that, I'm just piling on more problems and not adding much extra benefit. But you have to suss that out for yourself and see what works for you. But I would say, look, if it's causing side effects, if you can't sleep, if you think your girlfriend's cheating on you, if you find a sudden affinity for Thai ladyboys that you didn't have before, you may want to back off of it and just stay away from it. You know, there are some really weird side effects from Tren. Those who know what I'm talking about know what I'm talking about. But anyway, man, just proceed with caution. Be smart with your use. All right, next question here is from John H. John asks, if you're already taking growth hormone, would adding Tesamorelin be redundant, or could there still be some added benefits? Does it make a noticeable difference if you're already very lean? You know, I've heard some people lately talking about adding Tesamorelin with GH. I don't know where this is coming from. I personally, you know, look, I've never tried it, so I can't say definitively. There might be some logic that I'm missing out on here that I don't quite fully understand. But to me, Tesamorelin is just going to increase your endogenous GH production. And if you're already taking GH, there's really no significant added benefit from adding Tesamorelin to the stack when it's already there. I do know that Tesamorelin has been linked with lower visceral fat. It seems to burn visceral fat, but I would speculate that is just an end result of increased IGF-1 levels and growth hormone, the lipolytic effect that growth hormone has, that you're probably going to experience that from growth hormone as well. I've seen those results with growth hormone by itself without the Tesamorelin in play. So, you know, and look, you're going to get more bang for your buck probably from growth hormone. I get that not everybody wants to venture down that path, and they would rather use stuff that stimulate your own natural production. But I look at Tesamorelin like the equivalent of using HCG to get your testosterone levels up. Probably has some indirect effects on other pathways that I'm not missing out on, but essentially that's what it is. It's the end result. The benefits from Tesamorelin are going to be from increasing your growth hormone. And in my mind, if you're already on growth hormone, what really is it contributing at that point? It seems redundant, and there's not this negative feedback loop. Like I get taking HCG with testosterone because it limits the negative feedback loop with the HPTA axis. Keeps FSH and LH up higher, whereas with growth hormone's pulsatile in nature and doesn't seem to have the same strong negative feedback loop that does. Most people return to their natural growth hormone production within days or weeks of cessation of growth hormone. So that's not a compelling reason to keep it in place, at least from my viewpoint. But if there's some logic that I'm missing here, somebody has some insight on something that I don't know of, put it in the comments section below. All right, next question here is from Fitness After 40. Fitness After 40 says, are oral compounds like Winstrol fat-soluble? If so, are they better absorbed when taking with dietary fat or with the meal? So oral steroids are lipophilic, means that they are better absorbed through the soluble membrane, which is fat. It's a fatty membrane. They are dissolved in fats. They don't absorb well in water. This is why I laugh when dudes do the sublingual oral steroid administration. The saliva is just water. There's really nothing to break down the steroid. your gut membrane, your intestinal wall has enzymes and stuff that can digest these things, whereas your mouth does not. So literally all you're doing when you're dissolving these things in your mouth is they are just melting in your mouth, and you swallow them and they're still getting absorbed through your gut. So you're literally wasting your time doing the sublingual administration. I've heard some argument that you can dissolve them in certain alcohols and then that makes them more readily available. Now, when they're in your stomach, do you need to have a fatty meal with them to make them absorbable? Not necessarily. Because of the enzymes and the way your small intestine wall works, that they will absorb through the wall. Now, indirectly, having a low fat diet can affect absorption because you're going to have lower bile production. Sometimes you'll see guys when they are on low fat diets and running orals will end up having stomach issues. Liver stressed out, your bile production is lower. All of these things can cause these methylated drugs not to absorb properly, and then you end up with gut irritation and diarrhea and other things that happen when people are towards the end. If anybody who's towards the end of contest prep knows what I'm talking about. You get a bunch of acid reflux and other problems that happen. So in theory, if you take a small amount of fat in with the substances, if you use I like using bile salts or ox bile to help with my digestion when I'm towards the end of contest prep and I'm on a low fat diet. That should help with overall absorption of food, both food and the oral anabolic steroids. Now, how much of a difference it makes, I don't really know. I've noticed myself that I have less gut issues when I use ox bile towards the end of contest prep. But if you think about it, like, you don't hear of guys talking about having upset stomachs outside of maybe Anadrol when taking orals in an off-season setting when fats are much higher in their diet, do you? I mean, most guys tolerate orals pretty well when they're in an off-season setting, but when they're on contest prep, they're on a very low-fat diet, liver's already stressed out, they're under a lot of stress, and they add in orals towards the end of contest prep, you'll often hear of dudes having massive upset stomachs. I've heard of dudes causing themselves ulcers. And so there is definitely something going on there, and it's just my speculation. I could be completely fucking wrong about this. And I've noticed that when I do use ox bile with these things, when I do take them with just a tiny little bit of fat, it does seem to improve the absorption and lowers the gut issues that people have with taking orals towards the end of contest prep. It's just what I have seen. This could be total placebo effect. It's just anecdote, but that's my logic on it. That's what I think is going on here. And it definitely seems, and everybody I've told to try the ox bile, you can try it yourself if you want to, when they are having problems with the absorption of oral steroids on a low-fat diet. It seems to help pretty drastically. It makes a big difference. So if you want to try it out for yourself, see what happens, see if it improves your digestion, see if it helps with your absorption of your oral anabolic steroids towards the end of a contest prep when fats are very low. Young Sav asks, have you ever experienced indigestion or nausea during intense training? What are the best ways to manage that? Yeah, I mean, it happens. I think the biggest problem with this is that dudes are slamming food right before they go to gym. This is a problem with bodybuilders. We're constantly eating food. There's never a time when we are not eating food, and dudes will slam their pre-workout meal and immediately go to gym. I'm guilty of this. This is how I used to run things. And then you go in and you train legs. You have all that blood rushing into your quads, away from your GI, and then your stomach gets all fucked up, and you end up with nausea and puking in a trash can. A simple solution for that, what I have found to keep yourself from getting ill when you're training, is just to eat your food a little bit further away from your training. I like to get my food in probably an hour and a half before I get to the gym, so it's mostly digested. By the time I get to the gym, I like to eat easy to digest foods, things that go down easy. I keep the fats pretty low when I am doing my pre-workout meal. I stick with simple rice-based foods, lighter proteins. Like you don't want to be slamming a steak and a potato before you go to the gym because they're going to be very slow digesting. I like things that sit light, some white fish, rice, cream of rice, even rice-based cereals, something like Rice Chex or Crispix is an option. If you tolerate protein powders well, that could be an option as well. And then during the workout, I like to sip on an workout drink that has a high molecular weight carbohydrate in it, which the main benefit of the high molecular weight carbohydrates is they prevent gastric emptying. They keep your, they gastric dumping, I guess I should say, basically shit in your pants, having an upset stomach. They don't seem to upset your stomach like the old school dextrose-based drinks do. I know a lot of guys used to slam dextrose back in the day, and then they'd end up fucking puking or shitting their pants halfway through the workout. And that's not a good scenario to be in. So that's the benefit of using a high molecular weight carbohydrate. And you don't need a ton, 25, 30 grams during your workout. Enough to keep you from going hypo. That's typically what I run. But simple strategies that will keep you from being sick. And if you need another minute or two between a set, just take another minute or two to let yourself recover. I know sometimes leg training can be intense, but I think most of the problem just simply comes from eating your meal too close to your workout. This is a good one because I just went through this myself. Will D. Where do bodybuilders find jeans and shorts that fit properly? Specifically, options that accommodate bigger waist without sizing up the waist, bigger legs, without sizing up the waist excessively. Yeah, I've had this issue before. When I'm on contest prep and I'm getting lean, I wear a size 30 or 32 jean, and my legs do not fit in size 30 or 32 pants. I have to get a 36 or even a 38 and just cinch a belt up. And it's really hard to find clothes. That's why you see most bodybuilders wearing basketball shorts, baggy-ass basketball shorts, and sweatpants, because they fit. You can just cinch a drawstring on sweatpants and go about your business. But what I found, the one place that I found jeans that seem to fit my smaller waist and bigger legs is Lucky. I should be getting paid by them. I'm not getting anything from Lucky, but what I found with Lucky jeans, they have a athletic fit stretchy jean that you can get. It's got the stretchy material. It's almost like spandex for jeans. They look great. They fit great. They actually fit my legs. I cannot do a tapered cut because they don't fit over my fucking calves. I have to do the wide cut, but that would be a great solution for you. I'd check out Lucky Jeans. They have if you need a suit, if you need dress clothes, there is the place that you see them at all the expos. They're out there. They make suits that fit bigger dudes. I bought one of their suits. They're great dudes too. Buffery Flex uniforms. They have clothes that fit big guys. Their suits are awesome. I bought 2 of them. Not that I wear a suit that often anymore, but if I have something I need to dress up for, I have their suits. They're fantastic, great quality. They're super, super great. That's an option for you too. But really, you got to find stretchy pants, jeans, shorts. Not a problem, man. Just get athletic shorts, basketball shorts. Those work well. If you're looking for fancy shorts, Buffery I think actually sells shorts too, or at least they used to, that fit dudes. They have their suits are actually V-tapered. That was a problem I'd run into with suits and dress shirts and things like that. They would be super baggy around my waist and big up top, and then I look like I'm wearing a fucking trash bag. So those are some options that you can look into. And last but not least, from the class clown, Joshua Perry. Josh asks, if I get my lateral raises up to 100-pound dumbbells, do you think I can fight the Avengers? No, probably not, because there's no human on the planet that could do a proper 100-pound dumbbell lateral raise. I'm sure there's somebody out there somewhere that probably could, but very few, I should say. Yeah, we all will see that dude at the gym every once in a while that's slinging around. I was at the gym the other week, and I was laughing my ass off. I saw this kid a skinny little high school kid that was slinging around 60-pound dumbbells on the lateral raises. He was literally doing more on the lateral raises than what he could do on his dumbbell shoulder presses. I'm like, bro, what kind of lies are you telling yourself if you're slinging around more on your dumbbell lateral raises than you are on your dumbbell presses? He was putting down the 60s and going and pick it up the 50s to do his dumbbell presses and then go back to the 60s for his lateral raises. And I'm like, I think you got that shit backwards, my friend. Maybe you should be doing the 25s for the lateral raises and the 50s for your presses, and you probably would get better results long term. So no, I don't think you're going to be fighting the Avengers. I think you're going to be getting fame on the line in gym fuckery and getting blasted all over YouTube for being a dipshit at the gym is probably what's going to happen. I don't think the Avengers are going to challenge you to a fight if you are doing lateral raises with 100-pound dumbbells. Anyway, love you, Josh. That was a funny question. That's all I got for you today, folks, on this one. I hope you enjoyed it. I love each and every one of you. We'll see you on the next episode. Rock on.